Welcome to London, to Westminster, to the farmers' protest. Andrew, you're there in the nice warm studio. I have to say it's not quite as cold as it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, thank goodness, but nothing would keep these people away. There's such a strong sentiment, Andrew, amongst the people who are here today. This crowd are so determined to see the government U-turn on this. Do you think Keir Starmer can do that? Does he have enough slack really here that he can U-turn?
From the MPs I speak to and ministers I speak to, absolutely not. And if you remember last week, Bev, there was a vote in the Commons which the Tories tabled, and effectively Labour MPs, including those in rural constituencies, refused to back the Tory motion. So they're standing firm for now. But he's fighting fires on so many fronts, isn't he, with pensioners over the winter fuel allowance. But I think he's picked a fight he can't win with these farmers, because people like farmers. They're incredibly hardworking. They provide 50% of all our food. And this money, this 300 million odd they've pumped into farming, that's not to promote food production. It's to do more rewilding, more wildflowers, more of this environmentally driven stuff, which has all come out of the EU and global organisations. So the farmers are in a really angry place, and I can't see any sign of compromise at the moment.
Yeah, they really are. In fact, Andrew, I'm just going to talk now to my guest here, Ollie Fletcher. Now, Ollie, you are part of a farming family, but you also run a YouTube channel. Tell us about that to educate people. You understand this topic probably better than anybody else here today.
Yeah, so I suppose you could say I'm a rural historian. I have a YouTube channel called Farming Explained, which is trying to talk through every element of the countryside and rural life and the food system. So far, we've mostly focused on history, but that does mean that I have a long view of what's going on at the minute, which is worthwhile.
So you can put this in a really great historical context. Is there any comparison, looking back, to what the farmers in this country are facing at the moment?
Well, since the agricultural revolution, there had been a conflict between landowners and farmers who were their tenants. And Lloyd George put a death duty tax on aristocratic estates, so a very similar thing to what we're seeing now, but it only hit the very wealthy. And that was progressive because it broke up their estates and allowed normal farmers, people like my family, to buy land. So my village has been farmed since the Roman times, but only since 1919, in the aftermath of this death duty tax, was it broken up and sold off to farmers. It's only been farmed by people who actually own the land since 1919 for 105 years. So in historical terms, the fact that we are here as workers and as owners of the means of production is actually really unusual. So we're here defending that, trying to stop this tax, which is regressive. It's attacking us and not the rich landowners. The rich landowners have exemptions through things called national heritage assets, which means that if you're so rich, essentially, that it's considered culturally significant, they won't charge inheritance tax on your estate. And of course, they put their assets in trust and they put their assets in limited companies, and those things don't die. This is only attacking the small people like us.
Some people would say, well, farmers are rich, even the likes of your family. They still have a lot of land, they have a lot of assets compared to other people. So why should you have the luxury of being able to keep your assets?
DEFRA's own figures show that the return on capital employed in farming is 0.5% of the value. And this tax, 20% over 10 years, is 2% a year. So from the government's own figures, they're asking us to put 4 times the amount of money we can make farming aside to pay this tax, which means that we're all going to be in the red. We just can't pay it.
Who's going to own your farms if you all have to sell them in the next 20, 50 years? Who are they going to go to?
Well, in our case, we have quite a small farm. So if my father was to die unexpectedly, we'd have to sell a parcel of 2 or 3 fields, perhaps. But that parcel of land on its own won't be big enough to be a viable farm, but it will be worth less than £1 million, which means that somebody could still buy that as an investment, get 100% inheritance tax relief. And of course, that means more people are going to be able to exploit this mechanism to avoid tax, and more people will be looking to do that, which will keep the value of land high, and it just perpetuates. This is not very well thought through at all.
I keep hearing that. The farmers' frustration seems to lie in not the fact that you have to pay tax. Every farmer I talk to says, well, of course we pay tax. We're happy to pay tax. That's what living in this country is. It's this discrepancy between the numbers and the figures is what is driving you all to be here today. It's as though you want to sit down with Rachel Reeves and say, can I just give you a maths lesson and explain why you've got this wrong? And hopefully then the light bulb will go on. Is it likely to happen, Ollie?
Well, if they wanted farmers to pay tax, they could actually govern us properly and allow us to pay income tax, because at the minute we don't earn enough money to do that. My father has worked very hard his whole life and he hasn't paid very much income tax at all, you see, whereas the middlemen make a lot of money. If they just regulated the supermarkets and we were paid a fair price, it wouldn't necessarily cost the government anything in subsidies. It would allow us to make a profit and then we would be paying tax as all businesses do.
You see, people would be baffled to hear that. They would say, well, hang on a minute, if you work so hard and you don't make enough money to pay any income tax, why are you doing it?
You don't do it for the money. It's a way of life. You do it for your animals. Your animals are more important than your family and a wage. You have to look after them. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to keep it going and to stand with my people as they fight for their continued existence.
It's, I think what this has really shone a light on, for me particularly, is this subculture of farming in this country and how sort of beautiful that is, and how incredibly collaborative that you all are and how close you all are. And there's something about working with the land, and maybe it's working with animals, which mean that you really grasp this. It's like a spiritual significance, if that doesn't sound like I'm over-egging the pudding a little.
Well, it's a connection to nature and to each other. I think it's a very genuine community. But we are, as you touched on, a socio-economic minority, and we are stereotyped. People think that we're stupid, people think that we're wealthy, obviously no help from the government on that one, which I think is a shame. There's no ism for discrimination against rural people, but everyone is aware of these negative stereotypes that we have to deal with, which I think is a shame. But I am very proud to stand here with my people. I think what we're doing is wonderful, and I feel there is a genuine sense of community and coming together at these events, which I'm glad to be a part of.
There was a protest here just a few weeks ago. Ollie Harrison was saying he thought there were 45,000 people here that day. If you watch the BBC's coverage, you'd think there was about 45 people here that day. We're going to have 500 tractors maybe along Whitehall this morning. But what next, Ollie? Where does this ramp up to? Will you stop production? Will there be the equivalent, effectively, of a farmer's strike?
Well, I understand that people have already been refusing to take sewage, sludge and pellets and that sort of stuff. So there's definitely already a bit of civil disobedience. This is an escalation. I think it would be difficult to deny that. I think it would be wise if we could keep the public on side. Polling suggests that while this has obviously become a divisive cultural issue, most people have some sympathy for us. Particularly since Dan Needle changed his mind. The government was resting on his figures. But we'll have to wait and see. I think if the government don't change tack, they are in a very risky situation, because you're seeing farmers and the NFU, landowners in the CLA, and even environmentalists. George Monbiot has come out criticising the government for stopping capital grants. So you're seeing this unholy alliance of farmers, landowners, urban environmentalists, all of whom have very different cultures, all of whom have very different interests, and generally all of whom hate each other. And they're coming together against the government, which just shows how incompetent their management of these issues is. And it's not just about inheritance tax either. They've frozen capital grant payments for environmental projects, which is what George Monbiot is annoyed about. They're talking about banning manure, potentially revising the guidance to stop muck spreading in autumn, but maybe all muck spreading flat out, which would just make agriculture impossible. They're also going to tax fertiliser, which would be the only alternative. There's a whole host of issues that the inheritance tax is clouding over, but we're not here just for one thing. This really is a massive problem.
Okay, Ollie Fletcher, what a great guest. Thank you so much. Pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to be finding more people just as fascinating as Ollie, just as passionate about this topic this morning down here. I've just met Claire Fifield here. Now, Claire, tell us your situation and why you're here.
So I'm here because my step-family are tenant farmers just up in Buckinghamshire, so just outside London. Really nice to sort of spend time there, to grow up there on a working farm.
And tell us the difference. So a tenant farm, you don't actually own the land, your family don't own the land, the council do, and you effectively rent it off them.
Something similar to that, yes. So we own our own sheep, we own our own cattle, we own our own tractors, machinery, all of that. So we wouldn't necessarily qualify for what they call agricultural property relief, but business property relief is really important for farmers. So £1 million cap, if you're looking at the average cost of a ewe or of cattle these days, it's not that much once you get a herd that's over a couple of hundred. So it really starts to become painful. We don't have enough money to pay into pensions, things like that. For a lot of the time, we are drawing money out of the farm to put it back into the farm, and every year it gets more expensive.
And so in the event of having to pay inheritance tax, you don't have a property to sell. You could have a huge bill, but you have assets which are worth a lot of money, but you can't run the farm without the assets. It's a horrible catch-22 situation.
Absolutely. You know, we make money from breeding cattle, from selling lambs, things like that. If we're going to sell half our flock, right, so that's half the income that we have for the next year, and so on and so forth. And it's a slow, over the generations, it would mean that our farm basically doesn't exist.
Now, you also, coincidentally, you work in finance. You have a very good understanding of the work that Rachel Reeves has done. What's your assessment of her calculations?
Her calculations are fundamentally wrong. She hasn't looked at the right figures. She also didn't look at the amount of farmers that benefit from business property relief. She didn't look at tenant farmers at all, based on the information that I've seen. She's misidentified where the money is coming from. I myself work in business relief and direct property funds. So I sell to financial advisors, and what they've been telling me about the farmers in their area, they're all panicking because some of them won't have 7 years to live. Farmers work up until the day they die, so if you're going to gift that asset away, I've heard cases of HMRC telling that people have gifted half their house away to their children, but because they still live in the house, the gift didn't work because they still had access. So if that's the same with farming, then this whole 7-year rule or put it into trust or all of this, I'd like to see how she thinks this will work in the long term. I think it's an easy way for her to claw back land, to build massive housing estates, and to mean that we're importing more food. It's worse for the environment, and it's worse for the British public as well. We want something that's fresh, it's local, and it supports our communities.
And Claire, how optimistic are you that pressure like today in this area is going to make any difference to this decision?
You've got to be hopeful, right?
I'm joined, Andrew, now, guest at home, by Ollie Harrison, familiar face to GB News, and of course one of the organisers of today. Ollie, the government were announcing they're investing £350 million in farmers. They announced yesterday. They say that's going to benefit 31,000 of you. Are they wrong?
If you heard of the Emperor's New Clothes, that is basically income foregone. So that is stuff that we've took land out of production to do environmental stuff, which is great, and they were giving it to us anyway because we signed a contract to produce it and do it for them. It's not new. It's trying to deflect what's really happening today.
Yeah, because Keir Starmer keeps saying, all of the Labour politicians, every time we interview them, we are supporting our farmers, we are helping our farmers. They seem to genuinely believe that.
I think if you tell enough lies, you start to believe them, don't you? They just need to listen. They'd stop trotting out that party line. They'd have all the money that they wanted to fix that black hole. If every time I'd heard the 22 million black hole, they put £1 in a jar, they'd have 22 billion, wouldn't they?
Well, now you're ramping it up today compared to when we were here 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, so we organised the one the other week with 45,000 farmers. This is the guy from Kent, Matt, that's organised today. I'm here because I like tractors, and I've met a few other sort of MPs last night and today. But yeah, no, they're hoping to have 500 tractors here to symbolise each farm that's lost each year.
So that's Matt Cullen. I'm going to be talking to him a little later this afternoon. Is the farming community at risk of having too many factions, organising different things, different events with different interests?
Yeah, there's so many angry farmers throughout the country, and they're all going off in little splinter groups trying to organise different things. Which is great because it shows that that people are annoyed. But equally, we want to keep the public on side at the moment. Stuff might happen in the new year, but you'd like to think that they'll see a little bit of sense and they'll realise. I don't see why anyone should pay inheritance tax. Not to mention businesses and obviously farmers. And we're organising an event on the 16th at the London Palladium, and that's talking about what we call BPR, which is business property relief. And any family business is getting destroyed by this, and some of them are 7 generations old. It's just ridiculous. Now,
Tom Bradshaw of the National Farmers Union is giving evidence today at the Select Committee meeting. Do you have any hope that there will be a resolution out of that?
Possibly, yeah. I was talking to some people last night about it, and there's another guy, Jeremy Moody, that's put a paper in to explain different things and how it should work. And I think they'll look positive because food security is under threat, and EFRA are responsible for that, the EFRA committee.
I was talking to John, our farmer, David, our farmer earlier, who's saying he's had to diversify a little bit and put some vineyards on some of his fields already to keep up with changing times. Is that the pressure that you guys are going to be under, is just to come up with different solutions, commercial solutions to this problem?
Well, exactly. So I've got 14 different income streams, and agriculture is just one of them, and that's just to keep farming. If you looked at my farm, you'd be like, don't bother farming, you're losing money when you get a bad year. Just carry on with your diversification. But of course, that diversification will fall under what's called BPR, and that when we're taxed at 20 or 40% on that, you may as well give up now. Agriculture has stalled 5 weeks ago. No one wants to do anything or invest. No one wants to put any buildings up. No one wants to take any staff on. We're just all wandering around in a daze. Like, what's going on? What's our purpose anymore?
So is it not just about inheritance tax today and for farmers? It's about other demands as well?
No. we've got to be quite simple here to get the message across. So it is about inheritance tax, APR and BPR. So you've got agricultural property relief and business property relief. That is what the purpose of everything that's been happening in the last 5 weeks has all been about.
So tell our viewers and our listeners at home, what are we going to see down here today? You have brought your wreath, big wreath.
Someone just gave me that to carry.
Okay. You didn't make it.
Yeah, there's going to be 500 tracks, I think, parked up down here in silence for, I think, for an hour. And then they're going to lay wreaths at Downing Street, representing each farm lost. But yeah, someone said, can you carry that for me?
And it is big, and it's a very powerful symbol, because that is how seriously you guys see this problem. It could be the death of British farming.
Exactly, yeah. There's literally no reason to carry on. You see, how can they tax someone if they can't afford to pay the tax? It's just daft. And when you've paid tax all your life, why should you be taxed when you're dead? It's the most cruel tax.
There's definitely disagreement on the numbers of farms being affected here. The government say it's less than about 10% of farms, they seem to think. You guys seem to think that it's much more than that.
It's over 75%. It's, you know, we can see what they've tried to done, but they've just completely missed the target and got it so wrong. And it'd just be nice if they'd actually sit back and go, actually, you know, they can blame the previous government for bad bookkeeping if they want, and say, you know, because apparently all the inheritance tax figures are on paper. It's not even digital. That's why they've got it wrong. You know, people have presented better figures to them, and originally some of them were on the government side, and now they're actually on our side and going, oh yeah, you have got it wrong. And if they just wake up and say, yeah, we have, it takes a bigger man to say they've got something wrong than just be ignorant and just carry on.
You've got to give them that off-ramp somehow, though, haven't you? Keir Starmer can U-turn on this, but he can't do it if he loses all credibility. Somehow he has to save face.
Yeah, and I think by not listening is making the situation worse. I mean, you know, look, 45,000 farmers a few weeks ago, 500 tractors today parked on his lawn. I mean, it's time he started listening, really.